Okay, welcome to class, everyone. We have a full day ahead of us, which is quick because it's an hour. So we did something important. We tried to remember each other's names. This is really tough. It's hard to remember a new group of faces, especially if you're taking 17 credit hours. So we have some challenges in learning not only the new material, but who we are in this class. But it's important that we get to know each other in this class because we've got a lot of stuff to do together, and it really helps if we build a trusting environment with our peers. So that's the reason why I want to focus on this just a little bit, maybe more than an average class, because of the situations we'll be in. We'll be giving presentations in here. So to begin, we'll start with a lecture, and the lecture is for the first chapter. I'm going to only cover parts of the first chapter from our limited time because I really want to get you into our first project, which is the informative presentation. So we'll be working on a couple of different things, probably have a quick activity to transition out of this lecture right here. So to begin, what I just want to know from you, gather information, is why do you think you have to take this communication class?
Because they told us to?
They tell you to. They tell us a lot of things, don't they?
Yeah.
It's an important skill to have for the real world.
Okay, so it's a skill to have for the real world. What do we call the real world?
Reality?
Job.
Adulting. Okay, yes, this adulting job thing that we end up having to do.
Whether we want to or not.
Uh-huh. And hopefully we're taking classes so that we're going to be doing something that we want to do instead of being forced to do something that is just to pay the bills. Okay, what are the reasons? They make us. We have to if we want to be full-grown adults and independent.
To learn how to better communicate our ideas.
Ding, 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 ding. Okay, so that could be a good reason. Maybe it wasn't your first reason for taking this class. Who are we trying to communicate our ideas to?
Peers.
Peers, work, everybody, your neighbor, your siblings, your significant other, your children, if you're parents, or your children to be when you become parents, your parents yourself. So if you're still in that situation where you're living with your parents, so these are all ideas. So we've broken this down into a couple of things. For one, that they make us, and if we want to have a job, this is a good idea, is one of the major things that your book talks about, the professional aspect of a communication course. It helps you communicate better. If you're able to communicate your ideas better within your profession, you will look smart. And if you look smart, okay, and it doesn't even matter if you're not smart, if you're able to communicate, but if you look smart to others, that perception makes you feel better about yourself. So there's actually a psychology involved in being able to communicate effectively. It's really good for us to be able to communicate effectively. If you can't communicate effectively, and people realize this, they actually don't think you're as smart. And that shuts you down, makes you feel crummy. So those two are interrelated. Well, the other one is related too. Also professionally, being at a community college, we are here to serve the community. So the purpose of this college is to train people in our area so that you can get jobs from organizations here that need you. So we're trying to actually lend you those skills so that they'll employ you. That's what we want. And then that supports the community, and that's only good for all of us. It's good for you, it's good for me, it's good for this area. So that's the other reason. And the college, this college, goes to the surrounding organizations, and we say, what will make you hire our students? We do this here, and there's nationwide surveys that talk about this. Your book talks about this too. So if you're looking at communication skills, Where do you think that lands in the top 10 of things that employers want?
Probably like top 3.
So, and to be fair, when they do this nationwide survey, it actually flips between 1 and 2. The other one are writing skills, and then the other one that's high on there are interpersonal skills. Because if you look down on the list, 5 to 7 is actually what you're here being trained to do. Because employers say, well, that's important, it's still hitting our top 10, but if you can't communicate effectively and if you can't get along with others, then we can't really work with you. We have to have you have these skills. And so that's why this class, why we make you do it. It's because this is what our employers are asking. We want to have your students be able to communicate effectively. Oral communication requirements. That's why this is here. Okay, so now that I've demonstrated, your book also talks a little bit about the importance of communication in democracy, which right now there's not a better time than to know how to communicate your ideas effectively, just as an individual person in any community. But I mean, even if you decide to move further into, let's say, a political career, that's something for you to consider, just to being able to demonstrate an effective way to communicate. I look at the news, and half the time I can't figure out what people are trying to say. They're passionate about something, but I don't know what it is. And that's so important to be able to communicate those ideas effectively. Okay, now that we've covered a few different good reasons why we should actually take a class like this, let's focus one more thing on the personal aspect of it, because that's kind of fun. Being able to communicate to people that aren't necessarily somebody you work with, other people. Who are those people? No, but that's a good point. That's still in the professional part. Being able to understand what customers are saying and being able to communicate effectively to the customer is just linked up into the professional aspect. So outside of that, who do we want to communicate effectively to?
Significant other.
Okay, or significant other.
Depending on the field of the suspects, because I'm criminal justice.
Okay, all right, that's professional, so definitely that's going to be helpful. You want to communicate effectively in that area. So our partners in life. I mean, if they marry you, don't they have to put up with you? Okay, so no, that's not the case. They don't have to put up with you, and you don't have to put up with them if that part is really lacking. And that's a big area of contention with couples, is not being able to communicate effectively, and especially not being able to have the skills to handle conflict, or having the intolerance of a difference of opinion, not knowing how to get through that. And so those are some major issues that we handle with the people that we love most. Of course, as a parent, how many parents do we have in the room? Okay, just a couple of parents. How many of you want to be parents eventually? Okay, so we have, so it's going to end up being about half of the class. That's pretty norm anymore when I ask students. There's a lot of students that say, no, that's not for me. So I'm seeing that more in the classroom. But that's an important aspect, communication, and being able to teach your children how to communicate effectively so they can get along in life. And we teach our skills, even if we don't have children. Every time we open up our mouths, we're laying down that groundwork of communication so that people can learn from us. Acquaintances, neighbors. How many of you have dealt with a problem neighbor? Okay. That's tough. okay, because those people are constantly in your proximity. So let's say that you get into a fight with your neighbor. Not like a, knock down, drag down fight. You could, but let's say that it's a verbal fight. And you won. You know you won that fight. You got them. Has anybody ever felt good when they, I'm on top of the world on this one.
His own hands.
Okay, so then what happens the next day? And you see them.
They avoid you.
Problem solved. So,
Problem, here's the solution.
well, depending on what you need for the outcome, you may need them to be around. It just kind of depends. But that person is still going to be there even after you won that. And you may have won that in maybe not the nicest way. So just consider that. These are all skills that we learn. So communication is important for a lot of different reasons. So this first part of the lecture is just to get in a little bit of buy-in for you. Now that we've been talking about this thing called communication, let's go ahead, let's define it, because I haven't even defined it yet. Okay, who thinks they can define communication? Go ahead and give it a try.
Oh, I thought you said you were going to define communication. I had faith in you.
That means, I'm not sure what it means.
Is it like I don't know, like giving information back and forth between like one or more people?
Okay, did we agree with that? Okay,
Kind of.
okay, that's good.
You got one behind you.
Conveying information.
Define.
Okay, conveys an idea, very good.
Well, it's sharing of information, knowledge, or
Very good. Okay, do you remember the word process within this definition? Okay, I am pulling up, this is just a different model because there are many definitions of communication, which they're similar, but I do like this one because it does talk about communication being a process, and it's alongside with what your book is talking about. So communication is a process. Who can define a process?
Sequence?
Sequence, very good. Okay, series of steps. Okay, and for a lot of times when we're thinking of a process, how many of you have a process when you go into work? Okay, a process when you get up in the morning. Okay, so we have all these processes. So a process is a series of steps, and you're hoping for some kind of a goal, some kind of an outcome with it. Now, the way your book defines this is it's kind of a moving process, rather than this set thing where at step 1 and step 10 you've reached that thing. So communication has that fluid nature to it. That's the way how your book is describing communication as a process. Now, there's other things that are involved with this. One thing I like, your book talks about this being nonverbal as well as verbal, and that's important. If you want to know something about nonverbal communication, you're heads and shoulders a little more knowledgeable about what's really going on in a situation. Observing, simple observations, paying attention to the words and the actions of the person, their body language. So if your body language doesn't match your words, or you notice that in another person, what are you thinking? Body language. I'm fine. Why? Okay, so those types of incongruent body language along with your words, that means you need to pay attention. You may not know what's right. They may not be a big liar, but something isn't quite okay with that situation, and so you should be paying attention. So you intuitively know when those are not matching. And of course with technology, it's a little bit harder. If we're using technology as a mode of communication, as the only mode of communication, You have to have a little bit more work in order to understand what's really going on in a situation. So verbal, nonverbal are part of this process. And the other thing is everything is symbolic. So symbolism means that nothing means anything except that we've assigned meaning to it. So if I say something like, at your desks, write this thing down, you're not going to fight with me and say, oh, but you know, it's a table, and we all know we're at a table. We know the symbolism of being in an educational environment, and that we call a desk something that you work at in education, an office. So we've assigned that meaning to it. And in different contexts, it can change. In different languages, it changes. With different people, it changes. So these are things to keep in mind. And we do this a lot. We do this all the time. That's why communication is so complex. Let's move to the other aspects of communication, the model. And I'd like to bring up this model because this is something that it's a little more detailed than what your book has, and it helps me explain this a little better, but we'll go over the same things. So central to this model, this process, is the message. So what's a message? Yeah, that's it. I mean, that's simply what it is, like word for word from your book, whatever it is you're trying to say. That's the message, and that message is something that is symbolic, that we've talked about, that we have to find a way to communicate to another. And so we do certain things with this. So let's say it's up in the clouds, this thought, this abstract concept. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to explain to you this process of the transactional model of communication. What that means is I have to find a way to do that by using words, a PowerPoint, my body language, my expressions. All of these things I'm wrapping up in this abstract concept and delivering to you as a receiver of the message. And then from there, you're looking at me, you're listening to me, you're looking at all these things I'm presenting, and you're saying, okay, so if I were to get down to this, what is she trying to say? And so you are deconstructing this message so that you understand it right here. You actually don't understand it with words, you understand it here. So that's a process, within the process, called encode and decode. So encode is when a communicator is taking a message and it's you're constructing this message and delivering it to someone. And decode is that deconstruction process, where the receiver is like unwrapping a present. Does that make sense? Okay, within your groups, I want you to be able to accurately define with an example of encode and decode. Give you 3 minutes.
But like,
Yeah, like he communicated what was found on the back of the declaration. Now, found in the car, the letter. Yeah. So that was probably like actually come up with an example. Is it on
Yeah, you guys actually were playing
I like the plus already.
I'll have each group shout out their example. I know you have yours.
So,
We did.
I'm going
That's okay, that's okay.
Did you come up with an
if
example?
I wanted to say, hey,
Okay.
if I wanted that translation.
I know early every group has an example, so we're just gonna move on.